Hello again. I'm Angela Taylor, your host for Unlocking the Club. I'm actually really excited about today's conversation. Going to reconnect with someone that I met years ago who is an amazing soul, an incredible human, doing some really momentous things in her journey. And so looking forward to having that conversation with today's special guest. And I also want to talk to you a little bit about some of those significant moments that impact your life. And one of the significant moments in my lifetime and in this country's lifetime was 9/11. And I've been thinking about that over the last couple of days, and perhaps because as we are taping this episode, we are right around 9/11, and it always invokes a lot of different emotion for me for a myriad of different reasons. I actually was in New York City on 9/11, 2001, and September 11th is actually my birthday. So I was about to turn 30 years old and had just had a lovely visit from some of my best friends from high school and college who were in New York. And we spent a lot of time hanging out in New York, doing New Yorker types of things and going to the US Open and watching tennis. And we had an amazing experience out at the US Open. It was one of the first years that they actually had the nighttime session. And I just remember the energy that was in the atmosphere when we watched the Williams sisters play during the evening and leaving the stadium and interacting with folks from Germany, et cetera. They had a band playing on the courtyard. There was all this music. It felt like a different time. It felt like a lifetime ago. A couple days later from that experience at the US Open, 9/11 happened. And I remember it really quite poignantly. Again, it was my birthday. My mother, who always tried to be the first person that all of her kids speak to on their birthday, called me at some ungodly hours, probably about 4 o'clock in the morning, my time in New York, which was 2 hours ahead of her time. So she got up in the middle of the night to be the first person that I spoke to, wished me a happy birthday, and reminded me that Michael Jordan, one of my idols growing up, was about to make a special announcement that he was coming back to play in the NBA. So I remember all of these moments, right? Really, really like vividly. And then things changed. I remember getting ready to go to work that morning and watching the Today Show. And during the Today Show, they had this special announcement and a plane had flown into the building. I kind of turned the TV off and thought this was kind of weird, but I had to scoot and get to the bus stop and get on my way to the office so I'd be on time for a morning meeting that I had. And a couple of us were talking about it on the bus, but we didn't make any sense of it. It felt like it was unusual. Certainly not a lot of planes or any planes flew over Manhattan. But at that time, we didn't have a lot of information. And I remember rounding the corner on the bus as we were rounding on 59th Street and heading down Fifth Avenue. And you saw some smoke billowing, and it felt different. And I remember getting to the office and heading up to my office, and my boss, Renee Brown, who we had on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and I had TVs in our offices, and remember turning it on and seeing the second plane flying, and knew in that instance that something was different. Something had changed. And from there on, it was surreal. I just remember not knowing what was going on, wondering what was going to happen next. We started to hear about what was happening in Pennsylvania and at the Pentagon, and the administrators and leaders at the NBA quickly pivoted and made sure that we all found a safe place to be. If we wanted to leave the office, we could leave the office. And I remember connecting with some friends who lived near the UN, and we felt that that would be the safest place in New York to be because they certainly were going to be protecting the UN. And I remember walking down the busy New York City streets that were now emptied. Like no buses were running. People weren't on the streets at the same volume that they typically are. And so many things that would happen. I remember going to Central Park and just laying on the bleachers, the softball fields, and just feeling like that was a safe place to be, perhaps. And I remember when phone lines finally were working and I received a call from my father, who had been trying me all day. My mother, who had been at work, had been trying my phone all day, and he was finally able to get through. And them feeling like, oh my gosh, at least we know she's okay. I remember the next couple days of us trying to walk down to see if we can help out, lend a hand in any way, and handing out food or water or socks or anything. And again, just the world changed in an instance. And when I was thinking about this over the last couple of days as we approach the anniversary of 9/11, I thought about how it's impacted my life in a bunch of different ways. Certainly travel is different, how we interact with each other is different. But it was in that moment that I actually shifted how I celebrated my birthday. 18 years went by before I actually was willing to acknowledge that my birthday was on September 11th. Oftentimes, I would wait till the 12th or the 13th to talk about my birthday with anybody. It was just a weird feeling. I didn't feel like I can celebrate my birth during this moment that was such a tragic moment for many of us here in the United States, particularly for those of us that were living in New York City, and certainly those families who were affected directly by the tragedy. But things changed a couple of years ago. A wise friend from high school, her name is Athena, shared a message with me on WhatsApp when everyone was reaching out to me on September 11th, wishing me a happy birthday. And one of my dear friends, Mary, who knows that I don't typically celebrate on September 11th, said, Angela, she'll respond the next day or later this week. And Athena was like, Angela, you need to celebrate the moments. She reminded me that we need to live in the moment and be grateful for life. And then I received an outpouring of encouragement from the other friends in this group chat. And it shifted how I had been thinking about 9/11. And that I should, in honor of all of those who lost their lives on 9/11, I actually needed to be grateful that I was here to live another day and that I had friends and family and opportunities to live fully and freely and to live into my dreams. And so 2 years ago, I shifted that. And it's not lost on me that that message that Athena gave to me came to me within the last few years of my mother's life, because she loved celebrating our birthdays. And me being able to celebrate on 9/11 allowed her to celebrate my birthday on the day of the birth in a way that she had probably muffled or muzzled for years on my behalf. And so I just wanted to remind you all of, where are we suppressing joy because we want to honor and recognize the challenges or difficulties or strife that others may be going through? Heard many similar sentiments during COVID. For those of us that are in privileged identities, where we may have more agency to navigate what was going on. It was still difficult for all of us to navigate COVID, but for some of us that had access to Wi-Fi and home offices and all of the comforts, we were sensing it and feeling it differently than others may have. Those frontline workers who had to go to work and put their safety in jeopardy. And I think many of us found that a difficult juxtaposition of, could we recognize those moments and be happy while we knew so many people were suffering, those families who weren't able to connect with parents who were in nursing homes? Could we talk about what was going well in those same moments? And so my question for listeners today is, how can we continue to honor both or all of our truths? What may be going well and what isn't going well? When we're happy and when we're not, when we're doing well and others aren't, when others are struggling and we aren't, or when we're struggling and they're not. How can we actually just live in the moment and honor whatever presents itself? So just something for you to think about today. And we'll talk a little bit about this with our special guest on today's episode of Unlocking the Club, LaNora Williams-Clark. LaNora was born and raised in South Central Los Angeles and went on to graduate from UC Berkeley with honors in political science, and then went on to graduate from NYU School of Law as she pursued her lifelong goal of becoming a lawyer. During her remarkable journey, LaNora has navigated the halls of arguably the best public university as well as the best private law school in the country. She's worked in extremely diverse legal environments, from an 8-person firm to a union, a legal clinic, to a big law firm, as well as on extremely diverse legal issues, from offender reentry to products liability, drug policy, to constitutional law. Her community work has spanned from the founding of a single-sex dual academy in Southeast Washington, D.C., to raising capital for the launch of a new progressive AM radio station, and from supporting the arts to protecting the artists. And in the midst of a blooming law career, LaNora found her passion in entrepreneurship and her purpose in the creative arts. After working as a commercial litigator and constitutional lawyer in Washington, D.C. for nearly 5 years, she decided to start her own strategic creative branding firm, Muse Creative Arts Agency, whose clients include the D.C. Office of Motion Picture and TV Development, award-winning jazz musician Marcus Johnson, and several small businesses, including construction development, corporations, law firms, and personal fitness brands. Muse CAA supports the development of 10 select creative entrepreneurs and their various projects, including a children's book series, TV film projects, theatrical projects, and other forms of storytelling. After wrapping up various projects and winding down several clients, about 10 years ago, LaNora decided to focus on her number one client, herself. So currently residing in Harlem, New York City, LaNora is working on a myriad of special creative projects, and we look forward to hearing more about them on today's episode of Unlocking the Club. Thanks for tuning in as we unlock the club with LaNora Williams-Clark.
Welcome to the Unlocking the Club podcast, where we host honest and direct conversations about journeys of access, personal truth, and reclaiming space. We share our truth so that you can find the key to own your truth, honor your journey, and reclaim your space. Grab your keys, your wallet, your phone, and invite your friends to meet you at the club. Here's your host, Angela Taylor.
LaNora, it is a pleasure to see you. It's been a while. How are you doing?
I am great. It's so good to see you.
It is. So LaNora is someone who I connected with when I was in Washington, D.C. It was, I believe, right at the time that you were getting ready to pivot from the corporate lawyer space to the Muse.
Exactly.
And I'm curious, LaNora, from navigating law, right, to your own domain, who was it that you had to be? We've heard a lot about what you did on your journey, but who did you have to be along the way?
Someone brave.
Yeah.
That's the biggest word that comes to my mind, because I literally had no experience with entrepreneurship, nor did I know entrepreneurs. And I did, but I didn't. I didn't know that I knew entrepreneurs because that wasn't the term. So I had a sister who had her own daycare. And growing up, my sister-in-law had her own shop, but that wasn't a word that we heard. And so when I decided I wanted to work for myself, literally, I'm like, who do I know work for themselves? And I just started from scratch, which was brave, because I had achieved so much at that point to sort of start over in a new world. And it wasn't like I was trying to be an entrepreneur lawyer. You get what I'm saying? It wasn't like I was going out in law, but I was letting go of the law altogether and jumping into the creative world that I saw burgeoning around and doing it on my own. So I had to just be open to my journey. That's what I say. I am open to my journey and brave.
Well, I love that you say brave, because literally everything that you invested all of your time with in school was to prepare to be an amazing attorney or litigator. And you literally were doing something that, to a certain sense, was the polar opposite of that. And it did require you to be brave. I wonder, can we unpack that a little bit? What consists of being brave? What did that feel like? What did that look like? What did you have to be in order to show up fully?
To tell you the truth, I would go through these mental exercises where I would ask God to get me fired from work. And then I'm like, I don't really believe that, God, because I felt like I wasn't strong enough to do what was aching inside of me. So you have to remember, I wanted to be a lawyer my whole life, since 8. That's the only thing I ever wanted to be. And I didn't even know what it meant to be a lawyer, but once I locked into that as a goal, I was tunnel vision about it. There was nothing else. So when I knew that wasn't like, I shouldn't say when I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do. Once I achieved it, then I'm standing in it. So then you get on at a certain point in your career, they're like, where are you going? And I was very much so on the partner track of something I decided once I knew what it was. I'm not going to lie to you. I decided that I didn't want to be a lawyer after my first year in law school.
Oh, wow. So early on in the journey, what was it that had you thinking, maybe this isn't what I want to do?
9/11, which is very interesting that you say that, because I moved to New York about 2 weeks before 9/11 happened.
Did you really?
So my first year in law school was 9/11. I was literally in, I want to say, tax class when the building fell down. And I saw the second building fall with my own eyes. And so when you go to law school, it's such an intense experience that the whole world doesn't exist. And then all of a sudden, the whole world's falling apart. And so that focus that, you know what I mean? Like that I had about it was instantly, it was like the towers falling. All that fell for me. And my eyes were open in a way that couldn't be closed. You know what I'm saying? It was like, I can't take this that serious, as serious as I wanted to take it, to like block out the world, block out this. No, I cannot do that. These classes don't seem as important as they did yesterday.
Puts things in perspective for sure.
Yes. And so I knew that there was something bigger than this career or even this law school education that I was embarking on. And mind you, it's like day one.
Right. Literally day one.
Literally, like, I think it was like day 3 because go to school right after Labor Day. And so it was like day 3.
Well, I want to kind of dig into like how that dream was planted in your mind when you were in 8th grade or 8 years old. But before we do that, I think there's an interesting parallel that you had between when you were saying in the law firm, you wanted something to go bad or get fired so that you can actually pursue something different. The juxtaposition between that and 9/11, that the world crumbling freed you from this lifelong dream of being a lawyer in that moment. And it took something like that to trigger something in you. What was triggered in you that said, maybe there's something different out there for me?
I just became aware that I wanted to be a lawyer. So to connect it to the kind of question that you were asking, where did that initial impetus to be a lawyer even come from? So I grew up in the hood. I'm from South Central LA. I'm from the Pueblo, and I moved to 99th and Figure Ward. So my world did not consist of anybody, not one person who was a professional. So the closest professionals ever in my life were teachers. And so I had a 4th grade teacher, and I used to be that kid. I was a teacher's pet, but I'm also like me. I kind of always had swag and, you know what I mean? Like I can play the dozens. I mean, I just was a certain kind of kid. And so even though I was a nerd, I was the nerd that would use my teacher's pet status to get everybody else. And so I had this teacher, Mr. Savage, who's like, you're going to be a lawyer. You're going to be a lawyer. I'm like, that's literally the only thing anybody ever said to me. I never thought about a job. So then that was just planted in my head. That was 4th grade. So I was like, okay, I must gonna be a lawyer because Mr. Savage was convinced of it. It wasn't like he was asked to be, you know,
what you wanted to
I want to be a lawyer, right? And so in 5th grade, I had another teacher, Mr. Willis, and he brought in a neurosurgeon, a pediatric neurosurgeon, to come talk to us. And he wrote his salary on the board. And at that point, I wanted to be a pediatric neurosurgeon. Right.
You're like, I like those zeros. I like all those zeros, right?
Right. And so I was like, oh, forget this lawyer stuff. I'm going to be a pediatric neurosurgeon. But over time, so 4th grade, I knew that I was going to be a lawyer. 5th grade, I'm like, Mr. Savage don't know what to talk about because them zeros belong to me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. And then as you start to see the skills that it takes to do things, I relented to the particular skills that I had. And everybody who encouraged me, who came into my life, it was very clear that I had the gift of gab. I like to make connections in a certain kind of way. It was sort of natural. And the bigger thing was coming from where I came from, I needed to achieve high. And you go with what you're good at. You don't just go running around doing some stuff that just sound good and then you don't end up being anything.
No, that is so true. Well, what I love is this picture of 4th grade LaNora leveraging social capital. Like we talk about it quite a bit on this show, it is who you know. It is about relationships, like when you're navigating the corporate space or if you're an entrepreneur. And so social capital matters. And so you may not have known the terminology, but you did it naturally, is building bridges and relationships with others. But I also found it quite profound that you had these 2 teachers at that stage in your journey who saw you, who saw your talent, and they planted a seed that may not have been the seed that ultimately would turn into fruit for you, right? But they planted a seed that gave you something to hang on to and to pull yourself into your future.
For sure, especially because they were 2 very strong men. And at my elementary school, it's not very typical to have men, or especially these days, in the school system. And so I grew up, like I said, in the hood, 99th and Figueroa. We had a strong principal, Mr. Barrett. We had 3 strong Black male teachers, Mr. Willis, Mr. Savage, and Mr. Slater. We had 2 guys on the yard, Tyrone and Terrell, all these kids who had no fathers. At this school, you understand? Like nobody messed with us. Big brothers coming to beat people up. And it's like nobody getting in these walls, And so to have these type of men tell you, empower you. And also when I end up being bused to junior high. And I promise you, it's Mr. Willis and Mr. Savage. I have no idea how this happened. I wasn't just bused, period. I was put into a special honors program at one of the most elite public schools in LA. So
it's amazing.
Yeah.
And another reminder of how educators impact a child's journey.
Yeah.
Just believing in someone, how it led you to this remarkable journey. And maybe it had a pivot at the end, but it led you to a place where you were then able to make a choice of what you wanted to do. And that was to become the Muse.
Yeah. And I enjoy being a lawyer. Don't get me wrong. It's just that once it was real, it was very obvious to me that it wasn't going to sustain me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I think this is a really important place. The premise behind Unlocking the Club is for so long, we want to be part of those clubs, corporate law world or the corporate America or whatever the domain is that you thrive in, and thinking that that's where we want to be. That's I'm going to work hard. I'm going to put my head down, work extremely hard to get to that point. And what you recognized early on was you got there and it wasn't the place for you. It wasn't the club that you wanted to unlock.
Yeah, the brick wall.
It's the brick wall.
People talk about the glass ceiling all the time. So what if you don't have a glass ceiling?
Yeah.
Right?
What was it about your experience, again, from litigation to creating some amazing programs? What was it about your experience that you were able to say, not for me?
When I got on the radar, when they started seeing that I had the evaluations, the connections within the firm to be on partner track. And then I felt like, oh my God, cause I was so hiding. It was the best. I'm just getting paid. You know what I'm saying? I'm working from home. My life, I was just cute in my head. I knew I didn't want to be there, but it was so cushy that it worked. And a lot of that, why it worked is because I was good at certain things, I have a natural skill of connecting very fast. People feel like they have more of me than they actually in real time do. So I didn't really drink. It's a big drinking culture at law firms. So even like a couple sips, even 20 years later now, if I have a couple sips, I love everybody. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't, and I didn't love everybody at my firm. You know what I mean? That was inappropriate for me. And so I would do these big impact things at the beginning of events. Make yourself known, make yourself seen. I would be the one making sure everybody's, just, hey, just connecting people who aren't talking to each other, like kind of being, I felt like I was always like a recruiter more than I ever was anything else. Like, you know how the recruiter comes and gets the party started and then they kind of leave, but you know that the recruitment team created this environment. And so in that way, I was able to make myself seem that I was there more than I was. So I was able to handle the discomfort of being there more than I would say my peers, my Black peers who felt very uncomfortable in those situations because it's like you're kind of standing around. How long do I stay? These type of things. And I was like, hey, like I was having fun for a minute. Then I kind of sneak off and people like, where LaNora go? I'm like, she was here. Remember she did this? Remember she,
so like you didn't have to, it didn't have to be the volume of interaction. It was a quality of interaction where you were
quality. Yeah.
But I'm curious though. So you have this kid from South Central LA and your relationships building skills was your currency. But if we think about the legal field, there was an article that came out a couple of years ago, I believe, in the New York Times, The Faces of Power. And they show, like in some of the top law firms around the country, it's all white men. Right?
Yes.
How were you able to have an impact and show up and be seen in those spaces and have the confidence to do so?
Because I mostly dealt with the people, my peers. And so, like, I felt like a Serena a little bit. I was better than them. So.
You knew it. You knew you were better than them.
And I think a lot of that comes from being from the hood a little bit and also what I was saying about the impact. I never had to put myself in their space long enough to feel uncomfortable. Even when I was bused to school, I was bused. I would go get my education. At lunch, I'd hang out with the other Black kids. You know what I mean? Even like to this day, like I live in Harlem. I've been able to have only the part of me that competes with them or is on their level. That's the only interaction I'm having. But like you said, at the point where I figured out I was on partner track, that's where that whole strategy didn't work anymore. So this is what you're getting at. You're like, okay, I see you working it. At a certain point, it doesn't work, right? Because I was working for me because I was on the summer associate committee. So I'm bringing in young associates, right? So I feel confident in myself, but I'm not making big connections with the top brass partners at the firm. And so I had a reputation for doing good work. So I would get good work. And then I was also very valuable to the actual firm because, you know, everybody has to help with interviewing and recruiting type stuff. I would get my firm Supreme Court clerks. And so they call it big law. At big law firms, they compete for these like, you know, right. And they're the top of the top. If you are a clerk for a Supreme Court judge, that's like 20 people a year out of all the people on earth. And so for a firm to get someone like that is a positive thing. And I would get people who all the firms are looking for. They will make sure to bring them into my space to have an interview. And so like I became very valuable to, right. I became very valuable to the firm, but that's a different and I didn't learn this at the time, but that's a whole different layer than to my actual partners at my firm. So I was valuable to the partners because I did good work. But at a certain point, they needed me to have a network so that I get work. And I had no idea that that's what I was supposed to be doing all these years. So even at Berkeley, at NYU, like I said, I would go compete at school. Yeah, you think you better be, look at my grade. Boom. And then I would go, you're my man, you're my friend. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't part of anything. So then when it came to, oh, we're thinking about you as partner, send us a list of the people who you know might be in-house at this place. And I was like, I'm talking about people.
Yeah. Well, and was it that you didn't think that you had the capacity or capability of talking to them, or that you had the network? What had you thinking that you couldn't show up powerfully in that domain?
I had no idea that that was expected of me whatsoever. And then once I knew it was, I did have that capacity. But at that point, I was 4 years into my firm and I was ready to go. I had a 3 to 5 year sentence that I gave myself and I was ready to go. So my firm brought in outside consultants to help really minority. It was actually an issue. No one knew that they were supposed to be doing this. I think they did research or something, wondering why like they cared. My firm, like I had an adult firm. All you can do is care. You can't fix everything fast. So by the time this program came in, it was perfect timing to me from God, because I'm like, cool. I'm learning what I needed to know a long time ago for this career, but I'm going into a new one. So literally I would go to the class. No one was going to the classes because they were offended, because I think the firm accidentally made a misstep in the sort of targeting.
Sure. Certain groups.
And so people don't feel like I needed that. I need that, and it was just something they were offering and people felt offended by it. Me, I'm like, cool. This is what I had no idea. And they would break it down. Hey, all the partners, whatever. I didn't write none of the partners. Well, I did. I knew I was leaving. I was honest with my firm, and that's just the truth. So then I did it in my real life. So remember I said I knew no entrepreneurs. So then I start just being brave and I would do little stuff. So I'm still at the firm and I'm testing these things right at the end, right? So I would do things like, so my first client was my husband. These pieces are accident kit. Well, this piece at least.
So we're pointing out some amazing art. If you're listening to the podcast in the background, and you can see it on our YouTube channel, LaNora has some amazing art on her wall that she was pointing to.
So I would test my ability to be brave. So I would be like, okay, I have these pieces and I want to get them in this local bar or whatever on U Street. And I'm like, okay, I eat here all the time. I know I pay somebody's salary. So I'm going to go and I'll chit chat with the bartender slowly and be like, you know what? And so then I would just have these little successes. So then it made me want to bill a lot of hours at my firm, which is like kind of low level work at the time that my firm wanted me to get more high level work to be on partnership track. And so I was navigating, being honest with them about the fact that, please don't put me on the radar. Like, as a Black person who it doesn't happen to a lot, like I felt a lot of guilt around them wanting to groom me in this way and me knowing that I didn't want to do it. And on top of not wanting to do it, I was doing something that I knew wasn't gonna make me money, like, right? You know what I mean? Like,
so let's get into that guilt, though. So what would you have been guilty of for getting the information?
What is, go back.
You said you felt guilty of taking in that information.
No, I didn't feel guilty about that. I felt guilty about the fact that as a member of the Black community, that this is something that is kept from us in many ways. And I'm sitting here being handed it, and I'm deciding not to. So is it my fear? Is it that, so like it was a lot of guilt around. There's probably literally 10 people in the United States being put on partnership track that look like me. And I promise you it's probably zero from the projects of lost, you know what I mean? And so standing in that space and saying, oh no, I'm just going to quit and go like try to get my husband's art in a little bar on U Street.
That was a big change. And I imagine you had all these people, like your teachers, 4th and 5th grade teachers that were watching to see if you were going to become that lawyer or the neuroscientist, right?
I had mentors. One of my biggest mentors was Derek Bell, who believed in my dopeness as a critical race theorist. I claim that title now, but he actually helped me leave the firm because he's all about passion in general. And it's sort of like I just had a passion for something, but that thing, like I didn't want to leave my firm and then go get a big contract with someone and just work that and say I'm an entrepreneur, when really I wanted to immerse myself in the process of becoming something. Like, what did it look like to literally just jump out there and say, this world needs me. I have these skills. How can I help creatives stop being broke?
Yeah. Oftentimes I'll say that success is in the process, not just the outcome. So often we look at the final result to see if we've been successful or not. In the learning journey that can happen along the way, there can be a lot of success that you find on that track. You mentioned earlier, you kind of referenced Serena. And I think recently Serena in the US Open, when she won her first match, on the encore interview, they asked her, she was surprised at the result. And she paused and looked, I'm Serena, like, right? I'm
baby.
Gold standard. And you had that to a certain extent. You're like, I've done the work. I know that I've outperformed people in the classroom from a young age till now at NYU. And still we have to prove ourselves in those moments.
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, was there anything that you felt like you had to prove?
Yeah. I had to prove that I could eat every day.
Yeah. That you can earn a living doing this non-traditional thing that.
Right. And also I had to prove that I was serious about the change because, like I said, my first step was to find other entrepreneurs. And it was in a space, I was in Washington, D.C., very Black place. And the first thing that was very obvious was I had these skills that were helpful to my community. And I'm like, nah, guy, I need y'all to help me to become an entrepreneur in the space that I'm trying to be, not try to get me to help y'all with my legal skills and my strategic mind. I'm willing to be a resource here, but like I need you guys who are using me as that resource to introduce me as the Muse. Stop saying she's a lawyer. That was a big, even to this day, people have the urge to introduce me that way. And for a long time, I just would not allow it until my friend told me that you are a lawyer. You earned that. Like, stop. I don't have to dim my light in order to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's an important point. And it kind of dovetails with my open about these moments. Sometimes we compartmentalize things on purpose. And I found myself doing that. Like I spent 20 years in the WNBA, 20 plus years in the WNBA. It was such a large part of my life. And then when I went full time to be an entrepreneur, I very rarely talked about it unless somebody asked me. And it was subconscious. I don't know why. Like there's certain things that I now am looking at, like obviously, like there's those moments that you had that maybe weren't great moments that made it easy for you to walk away and do something else. But I'm just now getting to the point where I can actually recognize and value and celebrate that journey that I had and understand that it was so much of helping me to get to where I am now, but it's not who I was. And I think I had to have that distinction. Like this is not who I am. It's helped me get to where I am, but there's so much more.
Yes, yes. I have a quote. It's not the profession, it's the mind. And so even being a lawyer, you're like, oh, that's because you're a lawyer. No, I was a lawyer because my mind is this way. And people will be like, oh, you just always giving credit. I'm like, no, I'm my mama's child. I promise you, I'm a mama's child. Like there's no other connection in life that's going to make you understand me more clearly than being Gloria Ann's daughter. You understand? Yeah. So then people say, you ever think about going back into the law? I'm like, why would I do that? Why would I think about doing anything that I've done before?
Yeah.
I'm free. And you know how long and expensive that was?
Yeah.
So like you said, the compartmentalizing, I did that and now I've let that go. And so then that's a whole journey of letting that go, because then how do you introduce yourself in spaces where people are trying to even hear, right? Like, so you know me, you know I'm free, you know I'm the Muse, but you also want to introduce me with gravitas in a way that people who don't understand that way of thinking doesn't think that she's just some scatterbrain, whatever. And I'm like, oh, that's why they think that. But that took a lot of years. But God sends you word. And that's why I love words. So like, I'm a polymath and I'm a recreational mathematician. Every turn he sends me, I'm a pewterist. I'm these words just come and I'm like, oh God, that sounds good, and that's something that someone can just Google and be like, oh, she's great at many things like Da Vinci.
Yeah.
He's a polymath. Yeah, I said it. I'm a polymath.
Interesting. Well, I wonder, because I would love to hear about the Muse and the becoming. You talked about how it requires you to be brave to become the Muse. It doesn't not fall on me the fact that you became the Muse around the time that we had a new administration. Right?
Yes.
So when we were in DC, the amazing inauguration, all of this amazing energy was in the air. And we saw something that I think many of us never thought we would see in our lifetimes. And it was a Black president. Was that something that unlocked in you the fact that you could leave the law and be you?
Hands down. It was the calling. We all came together. You were there. It was so honestly a calling. So I 100% answered the call. Like my first day as an entrepreneur was January 1st, 2009. I was at the inauguration, sitting there
freezing.
In the mayor's box.
Freezing.
You understand?
Yeah, freezing in there too, because it was cold that day, but it was worth it.
I wasn't freezing because I was sitting in the...
Okay, I was back there. You were in the mayor's box. Okay, I missed that.
Like, look. Wherever you go, there you are, right?
Amen to that. Amen to that.
Look, it's probably like 80 degrees right now. I'm cold right now. I can't take cold. They always say iron sharpens iron. I'm like, well, I need some like in the inside because I'm made of iron, but my inside hollow. I need iron.
That's
I need for sharpening.
Well, so what was unlocked in you in those moments for you to now take this divergent path?
Really just the thing you said about the timing. So it was just like a good time to be broke, to be an entrepreneur, because say the world is going good and you go out and you're quote unquote kind of failing. There's nowhere to not fail as an entrepreneur at the beginning. It's just the word fail is not the right word, but you have to give up. You have to give up whatever life to become something. You have to start fresh. So as someone both me and you. So like we were at a certain pinnacle of our careers and changing. So you had just become GM in DC. And so we were introduced at that time. But of course, you were serious about your job. I was leaving my job, but serious about it. So serious jobs. So we never talked about them jobs. We came together on a project.
Chance. Yep, the chance.
Yes. And so you taught me a lot about networking. Just keep it real. Like you were one of my first real connections. And how I got to you, I learned through the strategy of my job, because I think one of the PR girls or something like that connected with my friend Michaela, and then I met her and they were like, oh, we have a new GM, Black girl naturalista in my town. Let's go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we just
that's
locked.
amazing. That's amazing.
And we knew the timing was too perfect.
Yeah. There was something special. There was this, I think we all believed in ourselves along the way in the journey, but there was something in that moment, being able to witness, again, a Black family in the White House that gave you a little extra booster that was needed and that we benefited from. And I think about you now, like, right, so you have 2 daughters and a son. You are fully the Muse. You're doing some great things. You're helping others through your vision and the impact that you're having in your communities. What advice would you have for others who are on a path that may be a path that someone planted a seed in their mind that they should be on, but maybe it's not what they ultimately want to be able to do? How can they be brave?
Really, you have to push past potential. So PPP has become something not so good these days, but it's a good lettering. Push past potential. We all have it within us to be brave, right? And so we get to the line and we just don't make that next move. And the thing is, you just gotta do it scared like that. When I was at the firm, I was a little nervous about doing my first oral argument in front of appellate court. So what I would do is take improv classes at this, and I knew that I knew the material. So once I got there, it would just come. And the thing is, I'm just going to shake in my boots until it comes. And then when it comes, I'm just going to do it. Sometimes you can't prepare yourself to be, how do I get braver? That's not how bravery works. Bravery, the very definition is, I'm terrified. People always call me courageous. I'm like, what I am is scared of being scared. I have an anxiety about fear. And so in order to address that anxiety, I run towards it. Steamroll, and sometimes not to the best of whatever, but it works for me, because for me, I say sanity over everything. So even when I run toward it and it's not good, I'm more relieved. The not good I can deal with. The feeling that comes over here, I can't deal with. It makes me feel like I'm losing a grip, and I've lost a grip before. Never losing grip again. I'm a run toward whatever is on the other side of that, because I know if I ignore it, or if I try to be like, oh, let me just get us a massage. You know that I don't need a massage. You know that's a sign.
Of something else.
Some stuff you're not dealing with.
Yeah. I love where you're pointing this to, and this push past potential, is because so often we see somebody who we say is being brave, or they're courageous, or whatever it is. And we think about, the outcome, or what we are seeing, or what is showing up for us. And we miss all that had to happen or transpire to get them to that point. And I think so often fear has us stop. Right. And what you were saying is actually lean into the fear. Right? Lean in. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be mortified. It's okay to wonder if you're going to be right or wrong, or if you're going to fail. But lean into it, right? Because on the other side of that, it allows you to be brave and courageous. And it doesn't show up in that form on its own.
And it actually makes the voices go away. Fear is a voice in your head that's saying, this is this. And so if you give into it, that becomes your life. It makes you stand still in it. So you literally never get rid of it. So you never attempt anything and you never get rid of the voice. You have two things that are wrong. Once you address it, you can have a victory, but at the least you only have one thing that's wrong with you. You don't have two. There's only up that can come from leaning into it because there's two things going. There's the fear and the lack of movement that's happening. So once you make a move, there's just, there's just,
the next opportunity, like it's the next platform for you to be able to experience. And
then you can get to your next fear.
And you get to your next fear, right? And you keep overcoming. But then you can remember, right? It's how you shift that limiting belief, that fear, to a breakthrough belief is you can remember, you know what? I was afraid in that moment 2 years ago as well. And I leaned in, like, and I pushed past potential. And now look at where I am. No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, we've been here on Unlocking the Club with LaNora Williams-Clark talking about being brave. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those spaces where she finds a space to be brave or to be in wellness here in a moment when we come back on The Back Nine. I'm Angela Taylor, your host with Unlocking the Club. We'll be right back in a moment. All right, welcome back to Unlocking the Club. We're here on The Back Nine with LaNora Williams-Clark. And LaNora, you talked about your mother, Gloria Ann, I believe was her name. And you talked about some teachers that have had a huge impact in your life. What's the most profound piece of advice you've ever received and by whom?
My mother told me, don't hesitate. And I will remember that forever because I had put a proposal together to have my own radio show back when we were in DC. And I was coming up with sort of the format. And one segment was going to be My Mama Said, right? And so, you know how you put together your first show. So I asked my mom, I want to do this. What is the thing that you say was your first one? She said, don't hesitate. And that caught me completely off guard. But my mom doesn't even necessarily talk like that. And so it resonated with me forever. So every time, like, even when you get words from God, he'll be like, do this. And I'm like, oh, is that what I'm supposed to do? Or even you'll hear a voice say, bring that notebook. And you'll tell yourself, oh, I don't need that notebook. I don't want a whole thing. Don't hesitate. Just at every move, someone say, you say, you came to me, LaNora, do you want to be on the show? Yes. It is quicker than thinking about it. And that also leads to the overcoming fear. Just don't have time for the fear. So someone asks you something, yes. So then you can be scared later, but it's already booked.
Nice.
And now you got to go through with it.
That's true. I'm so glad Gloria Ann told you not to hesitate when I asked you if you wanted to be on our show. I'm going to have to thank her for that for sure. One of our guests, Shantara Hardy, who was on a couple of months ago, had a statement that continues to resonate with me. It was perfection is expensive. Ooh. And so often we hesitate because we want to be perfect. Because particularly, I think as Black women, we find that there's apprehension to being judged. And so someone's going to judge me. I want to have all my P's and Q's together, right? And so you hesitate. And so I love that Gloria Ann said, don't hesitate.
Yes. And of course, I'm connected mind, PIE. So what's your friend?
Perfection is expensive.
Right. Mm-hmm. So pie, a piece of the pie, just that. I'm going to come up with
that creative. Okay.
Right for you with that. That's good.
I love it. Well, what's a moment that beside this show that you recently didn't hesitate, and what has the outcome been?
It is connected to this show, but not coming. I decided that it was best for me to come to my studio to do the show. And at home, I had a computer. I had Wi-Fi. Here, I only had my phone. I don't have Wi-Fi. And then I kept being like, well, the instructions said this. And I was like, You know what I mean? LaNora, you know who's going to show up at home. I didn't hesitate to make the move, even though my logical mind wanted to think it through or wanted to be the A student. My gut said, get out of the house. I literally had my clothes on a hanger. And like, when I say don't hesitate, like I'll push lift and I'm not ready. And so I'll wait for it to come. Like 3 minutes. All right. Sometimes I get 7 minutes. Every time I just force it.
Yeah. And go with your gut, your intuition. And I'm glad you did, because the background, again, if you are listening to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or any of our streaming platforms, take a look at the episode on YouTube as well. And LaNora has some amazing art on her wall. So I'm glad that you went to the studio and you could tell the energy and the aura. And I'm sure you get the vibe that you want in this domain in your studio. So I'm glad that you didn't hesitate in that moment. Will you talk a little bit about your studio and how important it is to you and you making that choice? I'm wondering, besides your home or your studio, where's the place that you feel safest to be yourself?
I would say, so I'm an artist in resident at 3 places. So one is on the eastern shore of Maryland. And my mentor and good friend, Bernard Demchuk, owns several acres, and he calls it Giverny West, which is modeled after Monet's Giverny. There's the same bridge, it's a replica of the bridge. It's on the water, and it's the land where the slaves escaped.
Oh, wow.
And so I felt Harriet. I felt like I became the muse there. Such powerful experiences have happened to me there that it's the place that my soul lives there. And so definitely one of the safest spaces in my life.
Wow.
Giverny West.
I felt that when you said my soul lives there.
Oh.
And I think that when you pause to reflect and to notice, like you'll be able to recognize those spaces that give you that, where your soul is there. I think so often we're in a hurry to get to the next thing, right? Versus just like consuming where we are fully in that moment. So I love that's where you found your muse. Well, LaNora, it's been fantastic talking to you. I could probably go on and on and on with so many other topics, but I know you have a lot of things going on. Where can our listeners find you, and what projects are you currently working on?
The best place to find me right now, which I'm excited about, is on Medium. I've loved Medium forever, and I'm a writer, but I've been private lately. When I started my journey, I was very much so seeking an audience or seeking validation. And then once I sort of went into my spiritual practice, I realized that a lot of my training required me to be internal. And so I guess I'm at the next stage and I could go back,
you come out, let all of us.
That's right.
Yes.
I've been uncaged. I'm uncaged, which just means that God feels that I have enough clarity to share in a way that's ingestible pellets. So I'm on Medium as at LWC Muse. I always have a bunch of stuff going on, but in my studio, Lioness Muse, which is the animated character based on my journey that Jason Fish, a wonderful artist, he created this character who's super dope that I could sort of channel my stories through. So I'm working through a series of children's books for adults. But I have no timeline for this. This is my fun space. And if I put it out, when I put it out, there's no pressure there. But Medium, I'm very excited about that. And all my reads are like 1 minute read, and they're very clever, and really they're just for me. I've been like reading them over and over.
That's the best, when you can consume your own content over and over.
Right.
No, that's wonderful. Well, we have on the screen here where you can find LaNora, and we'll have it in our show notes for this episode as well. definitely follow her on social media and go to Medium and check out her 1-minute sound bites. There's nothing that you can consume so quickly these days. So thank you for giving us that quick content. Thanks for unlocking the club. There's been so many different ways in which you've unlocked the club along the way on your journey, and you continue to do so. And I'm glad that the new club that you're opening up is a club that you're allowing us all in to get a glimpse at the Muse and what the work that you're doing. So thanks again for joining us on Unlocking the Club today, LaNora.
Thank you.
Wow. So thanks for joining us for another great conversation. There's so many lessons that I learned and concepts that resonated with me during today's episode with LaNora Williams-Clark. That the concept of push past potential really resonated with me for a lot of different reasons. I think so often we find ourselves being stuck or stopping and maybe fearing what's on the other side if we really lean in. And so listening to her mother, Gloria Ann's advice to don't hesitate and push past your potential. And there'll be so many clubs that you'll unlock on the other side of that. So I'm Angela Taylor, your host with Unlocking the Club. Thank you so much for listening into another episode of Unlocking the Club. In our show notes and on YouTube, you'll be able to find out where you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We'd love to continue the conversation with you. We have started a new group, the Code Breakers Lounge on Facebook, where we continue this conversation. We delve a little bit deeper and we continue to unlock the club for you individually as well as those members that are in the community. So go ahead on over to Facebook and search for us, the Code Breakers Lounge under Unlocking the Club, and join in on the conversation. For Angela Taylor and all of our amazing team here at Unlocking the Club, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, be well.
Thanks for listening to Unlocking the Club. If this conversation resonated with you, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or your favorite streaming platform so that you can experience every episode. And follow us on social media, where you'll hear about future guests, access special features, and connect with this amazing community. Head on over there and let us know how you are unlocking the club. Until next time, peace.